Hello, everybody. This is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools, and thank you very much for joining our webinar this afternoon on Lightning Forms. So first of all, what we're going to do is just have a quick introduction to Lightning Tools and also to Lightning Forms itself. And the rest of the session throughout this webinar is mostly going to be hands-on, where we're going to go through and build a form solution using Lightning Forms, also the document generator and Lightning List actions as well. And the solution that we're going to be building is basically a equipment request form. So if you wanted to request a new laptop or a mobile phone or something like that through your work, then of course there may be certain equipment types that they allow, and that would require some approval before that item was able to be purchased as well. So these are the sort of things that we're going to build into the solution, so we can make that formal request through a SharePoint list, and of course that can be routed through to the correct people so they can actually go through and make that purchase for us. So that's the example. What I'm going to do first of all, as I mentioned, is just introduce the company to you. So Lightning Tools is a company based here in the UK. We also have a US office as well, which is in Orlando, Florida. And we have a series of different products. So from permissions management and content aggregation, discussion board software, and data integration, as well as the two products that we're going to be looking at mostly today, which is the SharePoint List Form Design Tool and SharePoint List Actions, which complete our portfolio. So before we dive in, let's just talk about what Lightning Forms is. So anybody that is new to Lightning Tools and Lightning Forms specifically will have a good understanding of what the product can be used for. And then we're going to go through and have a look at some of the individual features, build a solution, and also have a good focus on what's new in this build. So if you are an existing customer, hopefully you're going to pick up some tips and tricks along the way when we introduce the product, but also you'll be able to see what's new in the upcoming release as well. And most of that is going to be around actions, which you'll see as we go through. So first of all, let's have a quick introduction to what Lightning Forms is. So Lightning Forms is a product that integrates into your SharePoint environment using a SharePoint framework package, and that SharePoint framework package allows you to go through and customize what would appear as a standard SharePoint modern list with the side panel, and to be able to customize that side panel in order to be able to build a useful form. And what makes it useful is we can take it or transform it from a list of fields, which effectively we get with the standard new form and display form and edit form, into a more logical layout. So we can group certain fields together using things like tabs. We can also have multiple column layouts. We can extend the size of that panel, and also go through and add logic as well, whether that logic is being added to different fields for things like the calculated expressions or the default value expressions, through to also building things like custom actions as well that can add some automation through to our forms through buttons, but also form load events also. And most of what you're going to be building is likely to just be using standard expressions and calculations, but if you need to, you can also use code in order to be able to extend the capabilities as well. So there is always that option to go beyond what you can do with Lightning Forms, although that's often limited. And then finally, we can go through and apply styling and conditional formatting using Lightning Forms as well. So these are the features that we can use throughout the product, and I'll show you in a moment how we can go through and apply them. And this is the solution that we're going to be building in this webinar. So you'll notice we have the equipment purchase request form, and we're taking that from what is just a standard form, and I'll show you that right now. So if we just jump into my SharePoint environment, we've got the equipment request form here with the uncustomized form. So you'll notice it as I go through and click new to create a new item. This is typically what a SharePoint list form would look like. So we've got a series of different fields. And of course, you can do calculations when you create a column inside a SharePoint list. You can also control the order that these columns appear in, and so on as well. But what you don't have the ability to do through SharePoint is to create that sort of column layout, the wider panel, introduce things like sublists and things like that very easily. Of course, you can achieve some of those features with Power Apps, which is an option, and that's a personal choice as to whether you find Power Apps to be an intuitive and powerful enough tool to be able to create the forms that you're looking to build. So what we're going to do is transform this form here for not just the new form, but also for the display and the edit. So you'll notice, of course, when I go through and choose edit on one of these existing items, we get the form display there as well, so we can apply some of the customizations to that form independently, and also on the read form or the display form. Okay, so that's effectively what we're going to be doing. So you'll notice on this screenshot here, we've got an improved layout where instead of having a long list of columns, we've got 2 columns wide, and we could go to 3 if we wanted to. We've made the form itself slightly wider, and we've also got the tabbed interface. So different sections of that form contain certain fields like the delivery address. So they could blend into one. And of course, if you've got maybe billing address as well, it can become quite confusing when you're completing a form if those aren't categorized into tabs somehow. So you could be incorrectly completing the address fields for billing address when it should have been for the delivery address, and vice versa. Under equipment requested, we've also got a sublist. So this is where we can take another list and embed it on the form. So that's ideal for one-to-many type relationships, and you'll see how we can accomplish that as we go through. And we've also got some sections in here that should only be completed by certain roles of user. So we've got the line manager that would need to approve the purchase request first of all, and we've then got the procurement manager that would also make a further approval before that request could actually be made. And we've also got the ability to add some buttons and so on with actions behind them on this form. So you'll notice at the very top on the command bar, we've got a submit button. So rather than just a save button, which will of course save the list item, the submit button can do way more than that. It could actually send that to my line manager that I've specified in here, alerting him to the fact that I've made a request, and that could start the approval process. Then he can come in here and sign it off if need be. And we've also got a print request, which is going to basically take this form here and turn it into a Word document using our document generator premium action, and that can then be of course shared with maybe a supplier who supplies this equipment to us. It could be stored inside a document library or shared externally as well. Okay, so that's the type of thing that we're going to be doing. So when we're building the layout, we've got the larger form that we can specify as mentioned, but you can still retain that modern responsive layout that you get with standard SharePoint. We can have the multiple column sections and the tabs. We've also got rich text as well embedded on here. So if you wanted to provide some instruction to the person who's completing the form, that's something we can do. So notice in here we've got the instructions on what's required for them to complete that section. So before we get into any of the individual behaviors and calculations, let's jump in and start to change the layout of our form. So I'm going to go into our SharePoint list here, and like I say, rather than having this standard side panel here, what we're going to do is access Lightning Forms. So we can do that. Just bear with me whilst I refresh. This has gone to sleep whilst we've been talking. Okay, so in the list, I'm going to bring up the customization dialog, and what you'll see here, this dialog box is giving me access to customize the new form used for creating new items and the edit form and the display form. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do everything 3 times. You can, of course, spend quite a bit of time customizing a form, but once you've done that, that design can be imported into your other 2 forms. So you can do all of the work for maybe the new form, export that design, and then import it into the edit and the display. And they maintain a independent form, so that you can also go through and make customizations that would be specific to maybe the edit and the display rather than the new. And an example of that is the approval buttons. So we don't necessarily approve a new equipment request at the same time that it's being created because it hasn't been saved yet. So we go into the new form, we create the request, that gets submitted and saved into the SharePoint list, and then the line manager can come along and approve it. So that approval section only needs to show up actually inside the display form, or maybe even the edit form. Okay, so what we're going to do is click onto Customize to start off on our new form. So when we do that, you'll notice that we get a new tab, but we're still inside of SharePoint. So we've got the context of being inside of SharePoint, which makes not just the look and feel of what we're designing to be more intuitive, but also the calculations have the context of being inside this site. So I can access some of the different variables and so on that belong to this site, which is useful. So in here, we're just going to make a few changes, and then I'm going to do what the chefs do and bring out one that we baked earlier. So you're not going to see me dragging and dropping fields for the next 20 minutes. So what we're going to do is, first of all, just go through and show you how we can add some different elements onto this page. And just starting off very simply, you'll notice here when we click onto the add button that we can go through and add the different fields that make up the underlying list. So these are basically our columns inside the list. So that's where we start off from. We can go through and add those. Of course, they're already on there, so we can drag and drop them as well into the order that we want them to appear in. You can also go through and create a new column. So no matter, excuse me, no matter how well we plan sometimes, we realize that there's an additional column that we needed. So we don't have to save and exit the form design, go and create the column inside the list, and then come back into the designer again. We can actually go through and create one of these fields as we're inside the design experience. So you can add fields. As we scroll down, you'll also see we've got data connectors, and we're going to have a look at a data lookup data connector. We're actually going to use this as part of the demonstration today. So this allows me to do a lookup column, but allows me to look up from a list that doesn't belong to this site. So that allows us to have a central lookup list somewhere, and that can be accessed from multiple sites in order to be able to look up from it. And we're going to filter that lookup column as well to make it a cascading lookup. You'll see that we've also got some other controls, so tabs and buttons and toolbars, rich text and things like that. And then we've also got the lists and libraries as well that belong to this site. So this is where we can actually embed another list onto the page here, so we can have that one-to-many type join. So it may be, you know, like a customer and orders type scenario that we're looking to build here. Okay, so they're all the different things that we can add onto the page. Now, when we're also designing the page, you can also add new sections. So what we can do here is add a new one-column section at the top, and inside that one-column section, I'm going to go through and add some rich text. And inside that rich text area, we're just going to provide a heading for our form, which is going to be the equipment request form. There we go. So we've got our equipment request form, and we can style this however we want. I'm just going to keep it simple, make it a heading, and maybe centralize that on the page. But of course, you could insert images, you can create hyperlinks and do whatever you want here in order to be able to get a good looking heading, or like I say, to provide some instructions on how to complete the form. So that's our first section created. Now, inside the second section, I can go through and change the configuration. So I'm going to add a two-column configuration in here. And this is where I'm going to start to drag some of these fields so they become side by side instead of just a long list of columns. So I've got the request number, the date of request, who the requester is, and we've also got location in here as well. So you can see how easy it is to go through and add those fields. And the next section down, which is currently still a one column wide section, I'm going to go through and add some tabs. So in here, we can just search on the word tabs, and we get one single tab by default. And I can go through and add another tab, and of course, as many as I like. And then in here, we can go through and set the properties of each of the tabs. So the first tab here we've got is, of course, just currently called new tab. So we're going to go through and change the name of this one. So this is going to be our delivery address. So we can go through and change that. So that's the name. And notice I can choose when this tab is going to be visible and when it's going to be enabled. And that's going to be something that I do a little bit later on in one of the other tabs as well. We can also set an icon. And there is a delivery truck. There we go. So we'll go through and select our delivery truck icon and add that. And we'll also go through and configure the other tab here, which is going to be the equipment requested. Okay, and again, in there we should find some form of icon that would be good, like a phone or a laptop or whatever. So we've got two different tabs in here, and within inside the tabs, you can also go through and change the row configuration. So again, we could have 1, 2, or 3 columns in there. So under the delivery address, notice that we can drag and drop now the address fields into that section. So becomes very simple to go through and achieve that. We've then got the equipment requested. Now what we're going to do here is actually bring in one of the other lists, and that is you'll notice I've got an equipment request form, which is my main form, and then the equipment request, which is actually the actual items I'm requesting. So I may want to request a mobile phone, a headset, a laptop, a desk, and so on, all at the same time. So what we'll do is we'll embed that by clicking onto the plus again inside this equipment requested section, scroll down to the bottom here, and there's our list. So we can just basically embed that on the same form. Now you'll notice it's bringing back a whole bunch of items that already exist inside that list. So at the moment, all I'm doing is embedding the list itself, but now I'm going to use a lookup column to map the two forms together. So what we can do there is choose the user sub item and select a lookup column or generate a lookup column to map those together. So my lookup column is basically looking up from the title, which is my request number field, and of course filtering the results on that basis. So now it's not displaying any items, and it would only display the items that are related to the request number at the top here. So that's our sublist, really simple to create, and you've got some properties and so on that you can go through and set in there as well, like whether you want the search to show, the headers to show, and that type of thing. And you can also change the header text there if you wanted to do that as well. Okay, so that's our equipment requested. Now we could go through and also build some more tabs. So I want to have some tabs for the approval section for line manager, a tab for the procurement manager to sign off on as well, and yeah, some of these other fields like line manager and so on. But rather than just watch me do all of that, what we're going to do is just bring that piece out the oven. So in here, we'll just load the design of the form that I created earlier. So here it is. So we've got the equipment purchase request form at the top here, and we've got the layout of those tabs. But you'll also notice as I scroll down a bit further, we've also got the line manager tab here and the procurement manager tab here, where they can sign off this form independently of each other. We've also got the approval status, and at the very top here, I'm just going to add some additional fields. One of them is line manager, so let's just bring that in. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Let's just remove that. Line manager, there we go. And over on the right here, I'm going to go through and add a data lookup column, as I mentioned. So the standard lookup columns that you have inside a SharePoint can only look up from a list or a library inside the same site. This data lookup here allows me to actually go through and look up from a list in another site. So I want you to be able to specify your department. So I'm going to call this employee department, and enter the URL for the site where that list exists. And this is actually inside a completely different site called Sales Hub. And in here, under my site contents, we've got a department lookup column or a department lookup list. And you can see here, it's basically got a location and it's got a department. And some of those departments span multiple locations. We've got marketing in the US and also marketing in the UK, likewise with tech support. But all I need at the moment is just the name of that site. So I'm going to grab that, and we're going to go back wherever it was. Here we go, and drop in our site URL. And once we've connected to that site, we can go through and choose the department lookup list. and then the display column, which in this case is going to be department. Now I'm going to OK that, but I'm also going to show you a problem with it. So if we go through and save and close our form at this stage, and hit new, you'll notice that if, regardless as to whether I choose US as my location or UK as my location, those departments are duplicated because it is effectively just bringing back this entire column here and displaying it, which is all I told it to do. So, so that's absolutely fine. But what we're going to do now is actually go through and filter it based on this US being selected, so that we only see those departments from the US showing up. So we'll go back into the form design. So into the new form, and we'll go through and select the employee department field. And you'll notice on the data lookup configuration that as we scroll down here, we can also go through and apply a camel filter. So I'm going to click onto the filter option, and I can add a condition in here that is going to map the department title column with the location field that is on my form. So we're basically doing that comparison. It doesn't have to be form input. It can be any other expression or value that you're passing through as your filter. And you can make these filters more advanced as well by having different conditions and different branches of conditions and so on as well. So now that we've gone through and applied that, let's just save and close one more time. And you'll notice that when we go through and create a new list item again, that when I choose my location, such as US, we now only see the departments in the US, and vice versa. If I choose the UK, I'm now seeing more departments that are available there. So that's given us a bit of a cascading lookup that is also populating that from a different site, which means that we're not having to duplicate lots of different lists all over the place and so on. Now, another challenge we face is with things like the request number. What we don't want is people just typing in any old rubbish in here when they're going through and creating the purchase request. We want that to be calculated. So I'm going to show you how we can calculate that from some of the other information that is on the form. And we also don't want people approving their own requests. So there's nothing stopping me from saying, yeah, my line manager approved that, and putting in an approval date and then approving the procurement and getting myself a brand new shiny laptop. So what we want to do is just make sure that only the right people can come in and complete these sections as well. And we also want a bit more than just the standard save and cancel on the form. So this is where we'll start to add some of our own buttons with our own logic. Okay, so let's just bring up the slides again. So what we're going to do in order to be able to achieve those changes, we're going to create some action buttons. So you'll notice that we can add action buttons onto a form, either as a button that gets displayed somewhere on the form. So it could be within one of the tabs or below a certain field if it belongs to that particular field. Or we can also add it as a command bar button as well. And we'll add those buttons. We'll also show you where you can add the form load actions. We've got lots of different field behaviors that we can also control. So things like default values and calculated values and validation rules and things like that. The cascading lookup, you've just seen, that's something that we can achieve. And we're also going to use some of the expressions to control the visibility or the enablement of controls, such as the approval buttons or those tabs that we mentioned. So let's jump back into the demo. We'll start to add some of that logic to our form. So we'll go back into the customization, into the new form ASPX. Okay, and to start off just nice and easily, what we're going to do is go into the request number, and this will show you the plumbing on how we can go through and make some of the changes to these fields. So in here, we've got the little configure expressions parentheses in there. So we're going to click onto that. And in here is the side panel with things like when this field should be visible, when should the field be enabled, what the initial value is and what the calculated value is. And we've also got required validation text, which we can also use to control what is entered into that field. So what we're going to do is create a calculated field. Now, if you're already familiar with Lightning Forms, you'll know about this icon here. So this brings us into an expression builder, which looks like this. But what we're releasing is a brand new expression builder, which looks like this. So this expression builder is far more intuitive to use, but what you're going to see is there's a little bit more to it when we're building things like actions and so on, where you can have loop controls and condition controls and things like that inside your action builder. So it's a completely new interface, which hopefully you'll find a bit more user-friendly. So in order to assign the value to our request number, we're going to populate that with the request date. So in here is the the requester, which we're going to use, and we've also got the date of request. So I'm basically going to do a concatenation. Now what I could do is do some string manipulation on the date, because it is a date time field. So we could use a string function to get that into a string. We could then concatenate it using the plus operator with a space and then add that to the line manager. But that all sounds like a little bit of hard work. So rather than using this assignment, I'm going to jump back to the template and have Lightning Forms figure that out for me. So all I'm going to do is just basically say, yeah, it's going to be made up of the date of request, and I want a hyphen in there as well. And I also want the requester. So we've got two completely different field types here, date of request and requester, but Lightning Forms will figure that out and allow me to display it. And you can see that we can test that against one of the existing items that we've got on the form. So this is exactly what it's going to look like. It's got the date, the hyphen, and then the user. And that will hopefully be a unique request. Hopefully we don't have anybody requesting lots of equipment on the same day. But if they did, we could also make it concatenate with the ID or something like that to guarantee that that field contains a unique value. Okay, so that's my calculation set for this request number. And what we could do is also set that to be disabled so that users aren't overtyping that with their own value and that type of thing. But I'll leave that off as something that we polish up later on. Okay, so the idea is we put in a date of request, we put in the requester, and we get a request number, which is fantastic. So the next thing we want to do is control using one of these expressions when some of these sections are available. Now you'll notice, of course, we've got the line manager field. So when I put a line manager in here, we want that line manager to be the only person who could actually come in and access the line manager section. Now, it doesn't actually make sense to have this section on the new form. We really want this to be just on the edit form or the display form. But in the interests of time, I'm just going to leave it here and show you how we're going to accomplish it. So against each tab, we can configure the tab. And this is where we can obviously provide it a name, as you've already seen, and then we've got the visible and the enabled. So I could completely hide it, or we could just disable it. And I'd prefer the disable option because we perhaps want the requester to actually see that that their request has been approved by the line manager or whatever. So under the enabled section, again, we could choose the expression builder and we can map this to the line manager. So if you happen to be the line manager, again, we could test that, and that will allow us to control that. So only the line manager can then access that line manager tab. Now that's not too secure really, but what we could do is if we take this procurement one, not just do it on one of the field values that has been selected, but we could also do it on some other contextual objects. So as I expand the contextual objects, you'll notice that we've got information about the form. So in fact, if I wanted to hide this entire section, we could check whether it is the new form, the edit form, or the display form, and that would be one way of dynamically showing or hiding the controls based upon that. We can also go against the page, such as the culture, or get a query string. We've got information about the site that we can get to, and also about the user and so on. And it's against the user that I want to go against. So I'm going to compare the current user and see if they are a member of a SharePoint group. And notice that we could also do the same thing with the Azure Active Directory Security group as well. So I have a group called Procurement. And if you happen to be inside that group, then you'll be able to access this tab, otherwise you won't. So again, we can test that against any item and see whether I am in fact, a member of that group or not. Okay, so that's controlling whether or not you have access to those fields inside that tab, which is useful. Okay, so that's the type of behavior that we can perform. And what I also want to show you is how we can go through and add some actions. So like I said, those actions can go against the form itself. So we've got pre-form load and after form load actions that we can perform. And we've also got command bar buttons as well that we can create. So at the moment, we've only got a save and a cancel button. So what I'm going to do is go through and add a new button, which is going to submit my form. And so we can go through and select an icon, just like we did for the tab, but we're going to use this for the button. We can control when the button is going to be visible or enabled again. So this is, or should be, enabled for everybody. And we're going to use the new action builder to come through and build our actions in here. And this is where you're going to start to see some improvements with this version of Lightning Forms. So one of the things that we used to have to do, and in fact, if I just cancel out of this for a moment and go into the old action builder, for every action, we'd need to complete the condition section if it was going to be conditional. So let's just say for a moment that one of the first things I want to do is to save the form, and then I want to send an email to my line manager, and maybe I want to show a message to me or to the current user to say that the form was successfully created. We could execute some script, we could set some form field values, so things like the status field, approval status, we could set that to pending or something along those lines. But we only want to do these things if certain conditions are set. So when I'm sending the email, I'm going to be sending this to the line manager. So I can go through and choose my line manager's email from that field. But of course, we want to make sure that that line manager field is not empty. So we would need to build the condition against the send email action to make sure that that is maybe a proper email address before we attempt to send an email to that line manager. And perhaps the same thing on the show message as well, and subsequent sort of save forms and close forms and so on too. And then we want to reverse the condition to maybe have the results of you haven't correctly filled out the line manager field, and maybe that is going to be a different message that displays explaining to you that you've not filled out that field correctly. So you can spend a lot of time sort of duplicating conditions, and for that reason, what we've done in the action builder now is you've got the condition control that we can create. So I can just simply drag the condition control over onto my form. And we could also start this off with a save as well. So we're going to save the form, but then we're going to go through and add a condition. So the save is outside of my condition at the moment. So in here, we only need to put the condition once. And my condition, if I choose the expression builder on that condition, is just going to go through and compare that line manager. So we've got the line manager here. So we'll say if the line manager title is not equal to null, effectively. And again, we can go through and test this. So we can see that what the result is going to be. So if we're happy with that, then that's my condition. And now I can start to put things into the block. So what we might want to do is set the, sorry, just bear with me while I find set the field value. So the field that I want to set is the approval status, and I'm going to set that to 0. Sorry, what am I talking about? The approval status is going to be set to pending. So we'll set that that value there. And we also want to go through and send an email. So both of these two things would only take place if the line manager is set correctly. So we're going to send the email from the current user. So again, I can get to the context objects, and under the user, I can get to the current user's email address. So we'll go through and grab that, and we're going to send it through to the line manager and their email address. And of course, we could say equipment request has been made. And we can put in some form of body in there as well. Okay, so we've got the set field value, the send email. I'm going to grab another save form so we can make sure that that value is set then. And I'm also going to go through and show a message which would be useful to display that message to me. So I'm going to go through and set this as a status message. It's going to be successful. So we'll call this submitted. And the text is going to say, thank you for submitting a request for your equipment with a total value of, and I'm going to go through and grab that total value in just a moment. And yeah, that's going to complete that. And then finally, we're going to do a close form. And let's just make sure that this stays open for a few seconds before we close the form. So if you didn't set the line manager field, then we could just simply show a message that this time is going to be an error or a warning. And we could display that for a few seconds again. And we'll say not submitted. Please fill out the line manager. Okay, so that's what's going to happen behind that button. And right at the very top here, we've also got this other brand new feature where we can create some variables. And what I found myself doing with Lightning Forms before is repeating the same calculation again and again for different actions. So now I can go into a variable and add a variable, and I'm going to call this one total cost. And I can enter the initial value of that variable. And I'm going to get that initial value from the sublist. So don't forget, our sublist is basically where you can enter multiple items of equipment. And in here, we've got a cost column. And I'm going to expand that and use the sum function in order to be able to get the value out for my total cost variable. And now I can use that total cost variable in both the email and also inside the message that's being displayed. So in here, I can say, thank you for submitting a request for your equipment with a total value of, and then I can use my variable in order to get that value. So yeah, the variable name was total cost. I'm sorry, I've got a mind blank here on how I achieved that, but anyway, you'll see it in a moment. So yeah, we can get the cost from there, and we could use that again inside the message as well. The other new feature that we've got here inside the action builder is the ability to export all of these actions and import the actions. So if we had two buttons that are going to be similar in behavior, or if we wanted to use it inside of form actions and also inside of list actions, we could go through and achieve that by exporting it. We don't have to configure everything all over again. Okay, so I'm just going to click onto OK for my submit button, and we can now save that. And yeah, notice we've now got the submit button on the form, which is great. Okay, so there's some of the changes that we've made to the form. What we'll do is just pull another version out of the oven. So let's go through and get the configuration 2, and hopefully it should look fairly familiar to this. And if I just come back into the command bar as well, I'll let you just check out the action that we had here with the variable. So under my, no, I didn't do it yet. Sorry, it's in the third one. We'll come back to that one. All right, so we've got our buttons on the form, and we can now give this a shot. So let's just save and close the item. So when we hit new to create a new list item in here, we can specify the date of our request, which is the 13th, who the requester is. So in this case, it will be demo user 10. Notice how that gets calculated for the request number. We can put our line manager in here, which will be demo user 12, and now only demo user 12 can access this line manager section. We can choose our location and our department, put in our delivery address and also the equipment that we're requesting. And notice how the sublist has its own form, of course. So in here, we're going to have a laptop for home use. The type of equipment is a laptop, and the item, which is drop down, is also a lookup, but it's returning more than just laptops. So what we want to make sure is that these phones don't show up, and the Jabra headsets and things like that. We want to make sure that only these laptops show up. So we'll calculate it to do that in just a moment. Let's put in our business justification in here and save that. So there we go. There's our request for that item, and we could create requests for further items as well. So we'll have a new phone whilst we're at it. Okay, so we've got a couple of items that we're making a request for, and again, we can go through and submit that. So when I hit submit, it should also go through and change this approval status to pending. There we go. And there's our message that we get back to say that it's now submitted and will be notified when it's approved. So that's our new item created here. And what you'll also notice that inside the equipment request, there's the two new items that we just created, but they're being mapped together using the lookup column. Okay, so that's the type of logic that we can build into some of our forms. And of course, we could spend quite a lot of time doing that type of thing. The next thing we could do is also add some styling, conditional formatting, and that type of thing to our form. Now, you'll notice that I've got the green theme being applied in here. If you're not a fan of green, then good news is you could just simply change the theme. Of course, Lightning Tools is picking up the theme. So if we were to go through to a blue theme, which is a little bit more Lightning Toolsy than the green, when we create a new item now, of course, all of the accents on that form are now going to be blue and not green, and so on. And we can keep that as a rule when we go through and apply styling to our form. So sometimes when we're applying styling, we really want to have a contrasting color to make it obvious that you've made a mistake or something filling out the form. But sometimes we may want to use the tasteful colors that come inside that theme and not the bright greens and so on that we may have used before when we're building access databases and things like that. So inside the styling section, you'll notice that we can apply some styles to all of the fields or all of the buttons or any of the controls that are of the same type. And one of the things that I might want to do is change from this black font that we've got for every single label on the form, and maybe use the theme color. So all I'm going to do is go through and apply a style, and with inside the fields, I've now got all of the different properties that I can go through and change to do with the fields. So we've got the input section itself, the display value, but also the label, and it's the label that I want to change. So I'm going to change it from the black font that is selected to one of the other theme colors. So notice that these are all the different shades of blue as opposed to the shades of green, but of course that would go through and apply the green if I was to change back my theme. So instead of choosing a completely random color, I'm choosing from a limited palette that is the theme colors, and that keeps my form looking tasteful. I can also go through and increase the font as well. So if we wanted to increase that slightly to 10 points rather than 9 points, and then preview it to see what it's going to look like, there we go. And if we're happy with that, of course, we can go through and apply it, and that will be the new look and feel of each of those labels on my form. So that's how we can go through and apply stuff across the board to the same type. But beneath that section, you've also got the control styles, and this is where the controls are named individually. And this will follow the throughput of the form. So in other words, if we want to go through and change something under delivery address, for example, you'll notice that there is the delivery address tab, and everything inside that delivery address, such as the address line 1, city, zip, etc., is inside there. And then we've got column 1 and column 2 as well. Now I want to go through and set something on the line manager tab, which is a bit further down, because if the line manager has approved this, then I want that to be obvious to the person that that stage has been completed and now it's off to procurement. So what we'll do is against the line manager tab, we're going to go through and add a style to the tab itself. And this time we want that to be done based on a condition. So we'll use the brand new expression builder to accomplish this. And what we're going to say is that the line manager approved is equal to 1. Okay, so again, we can go through and test that. So in this case, it hasn't been approved yet for that particular one. So we'll okay this. So there's my logic for that rule. And if that is true, then we can go through and change the background color of the tab or the border of the tab and so on. And that's what I'm going to do, is change the border of it. So if it is approved, we can now go really horrible and choose a bright color green, and maybe change the size of that border as well. And you'll notice that this is writing out the CSS. If you want to manually make a change, you absolutely can do. So again, we can preview that, and this is what it's going to look like. So as soon as the line manager approves it, we can see that that, of course, is approved, and we could go through and do the same sort of thing for the procurement as well. So we'll save and close that, and that's exactly what's going to occur on that form. Okay, so that's most of the logic, the styling. What I do want to show you is also a premium action, which is the document generator. So the document generator is an action that you can also add to Lightning List actions or to Lightning Forms, and it can generate a document for you. And what I've done is created a document already. So another one that I'm dragging out the oven here. And this is what my document looks like. And it is just a blank Word document with a bit of styling on it, our logo, etc. And then wherever we want to be able to grab the field values from our SharePoint list, we basically specify the name of that field within the double brackets here. So notice how we've got the title, we've got the line manager field, the approval status, and we're also looping through that sub list that's on our form, which is called equipment request, and going and getting each of the values from each of the rows that are related to that item as well. So that's using a loop statement with an end loop at the end of this. Okay, so we can do that by using a custom action, and let's go through and pull that in so you can see it. So we'll just import another completed form here, because you've already seen how to create an action button and so on. So there's our print request action. So what we're going to do is go into the command bar, take a look at that print request. So we'll edit that and use the new action builder to take a look at it. And it's basically using a premium action. So when we click onto premium, notice the generate document is there, and there are going to be other premium actions that you can go through and add to Lightning Forms as well, or also to Lightning List actions. So this generate document, as we expand that, you can upload a Word template, so that's already been done. So you can create your Word document, basically click onto the upload Word template and select the document that you want to work with. And then you can choose whether this is going to be something that will work with a single item, which in this case it is, or multiple items. And multiple items works really well with the Lightning List actions. And then the list or a library that it's going to be getting its values from, which is the equipment request form, and then how to uniquely reference the item. So I'm specifying the ID column for that one. And then I could either save this straight to a document library somewhere and you don't need to see it, or I'm going to open mine up using my browser. So it will effectively generate that document and open that document. And the title field is being used as my file name, and that is the request number that we're dynamically generating. Okay, so there's the generate document, and we did a save form first of all. So let's just go through and okay all of this. And we'll once again generate a new request. So we'll choose the date of the request. the requestor, location, department, and line manager. Let's request a couple of things. We'll have a laptop. I won't worry about the justification here. Let's just hope we've got a nice manager. So we'll have a Jabra headset. So we've got a couple of items in here, and now I want to be able to print this. So we'll hit the print request button. And down in the bottom left-hand corner here, you can see that we've got that file created for me, and I can click onto that file, and there's our generated document. So I've now got something that I can print, I can save as a PDF, I can share with other people, or just store inside a document library as a record. Okay, so that's the generate document premium action, which is a really good add-on to Lightning Forms, or like I say, to Lightning List Actions as well. So talking about Lightning List Actions, Lightning List Actions is a great tool for adding some of these actions actually to the command bar that lives inside a SharePoint list view. So we can add the same types of actions that you've seen that you can put behind a button or the form loader event inside a customized form, but you can have that run against multiple items inside your list. So updating multiple field values, creating multiple documents with document generator or anything like that are some useful features. So let's go through and look at building a bulk approval request for these equipment requests here. So what we'll do is jump into Lightning List Actions. As you can see, this is one that was kind of already done already. But if we wanted to build a new action, we basically click onto the plus. We can give it a name, so we can have this as approve instead of approve requests. Again, we can choose an icon that we want to use for this, and then we can control when the button is going to appear on that command bar. So by choosing current list, it can execute against everything that is inside this list without us having to go through and select an item, and therefore it'll always be on the command bar. Or we can say it's going to appear if you select a single item, or it can appear with all of these selected items. So I'm just going to go with a selected single item. And then the visibility expression can also be set in here as well. So we could go through and once again, make sure that you're a member of that procurement group so that not everybody is approving everyone else's requests. So there's our visibility expression. And then under the action builder in here, we can go through and use an update list item. And the list is the equipment request form. The list ID or the item ID is going to be the ID of the selected value. And in here, we can then go through and set any of these fields that we want to set or update. So I'm going to change the approval status to be approved. Okay. And we can now choose OK, save this. And now inside our SharePoint list, notice how we're not seeing that button yet on the command bar. But as we go through and select an item, we've got the approve button that we just created appearing. And yeah, it's not showing when I've got more than one item selected. So if you want it to be bulk, you can control that behavior. I've just currently got it set to one of them. So now we can go through and approve that, and that will approve that individual item and set its status accordingly. Okay, so that's how we can go through and build a solution using Lightning Forms, using the document generator, and also using list actions. What you've seen in here as far as new features, there's the completely new expression builder and the action builder. So that action builder contains that condition block that we can create, but it also has a loop block as well. So if you wanted something to loop through multiple rows or an array, then you can do using the loop. The variables is also brand new to the action builder. And something that has been requested a lot is for lists that contain multiple content types is to be able to see that content type control on the form. So you can now do that and then of course load the fields based on which content type was selected. Okay, so they're the brand new features. The products that you saw today was Lightning Forms, the Lightning List Actions, and also the document generator. These are all available as one suite. So there's the Lightning Form Designer suite, but they're also the Lightning Forms and the Lightning List Actions are also independently available as well. And document generator is a premium action that requires either the list actions or Lightning Forms first. Okay, so they're the products, and what I'm going to do here is, with just 4 minutes remaining on the hour, is open up for any questions that anybody might have. So if you do want to post a question in the Q&A panel, feel free to do so, and we can read it out and go through and answer that. I notice there's also some in the chat. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, first one I see in the chat window is basically, will the recording be sent out? So yeah, the recording of this will be available on our website, so lightningtools.com, and under webinars you'll see it, or if you follow us on YouTube you'll see it there as well, and we'll also be pushing it out on social media, so look out for that one. And yeah, we can also send it to you individually as well. So can we add a consecutive control number? So one way of achieving that is to actually do something with the ID. So every item has an ID column, so that is consecutive anyway. So every time you create a new list item, it's going to give you a unique number. So yeah, it's great to be able to sometimes concatenate with that ID column. So if you're generating something like an invoice number or a purchase order number or something, you want it to auto increment, that's something that you could do there. Or you can also create your own JavaScript, and that's maybe an example of that. So if you didn't want to use the ID column for whatever reason, you wanted to maybe start off at a specific number, for example, let's say instead of number 1, then you could go through and add some JavaScript. So any sort of random number function or sequential number function or anything like that, you could also use. So I'll just show you the plumbing of that one. If I jump back into my form here. So sorry, bear with me whilst I just bring that up. So where we calculated the initial field, the request number, under calculated, instead of just doing an assignment like we did, you can always jump into the function code, and through the function code you could build your JavaScript function to give you a sequential number, or a random number, like say, whatever. Okay, another question here. So can you lock the list from editing once it's been submitted? So once the workflow begins, perhaps lock it from the submitter, but not the approver. Yes, absolutely. So this is something that, yeah, you can do on each of the different fields. So if I take, for example, the request number field, where we've got the visible and enabled, if on the enabled, I set that to 0, I believe is going to be the correct thing to do here. Let's just okay that and check it. That wasn't correct. Anyway, you can. So if I set enabled to be false, in fact, is what I wanted to do there. So I wasn't thinking too straight. But yeah, if I set that to false, then basically that field will be disabled. So you could make that conditional. Maybe conditional on that approval status field. So as soon as our approval status changes to pending, that's the condition to make everything on that form to be disabled as an option. And you can make that easier by using things like the tabs, so that you're grouping lots of the fields together and that type of thing. Okay, so that's all the questions I see. So thank you very much, everybody, for submitting those questions. Of course, some of these questions sometimes come up after the event. So if you do have questions that you do think of, feel free to reach out to me on brett@lightningtools.com. Or if you want to reach out to sales, they are sales@lightningtools.com. And also our tech support team as well on help@lightningtools.com. This version with the new action builder is not published yet. It's likely to be some point in the next week. So we will be sending out a notification to say that it is available. So if you look out for that, and then you'll be able to upgrade to this version if you already use Lightning Forms. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Take care. Bye.